reported by the New York Times last Thursday.
If you want to figure out what the terrorists are doing, you try to follow their money. And that's exactly what we're doing, and the fact that a newspaper disclosed it makes it harder to win this war on terror.
And there has been an ongoing debate about all this. Should the press be allowed to report details of the programs that some argue could compromise national security? Joining us from San Francisco, KGO radio talk show host Bernie Ward, and from Texas, Chris Baker, afternoon talk show host for KTRH in Houston. Thanks for being with us, guys. Bernie, let me start with you. Is this okay with the New York Times did?
Well, of course it's okay. I love your intro. You said, should they be allowed? Chris, who would you like to see determine whether or not a newspaper can publish something or not?
Well, there are a lot of people who would suggest that it's national security that should make that decision.
So you want the government to decide what the paper can print?
What about that, Chris?
Well, first of all, national security has to come first. I read this story 4 times, trying to figure out exactly, all right, what information is in here for me. And basically, it smacks of, we don't like George Bush, ha ha ha, we just exposed your underwear. This is ridiculous. This is a time of war. These people are trying to kill us. These
Still haven't answered my question. Who determines whether it's a national security issue or not?
Well, it's kind of basic, you know, for obviously somebody with more play sense than you.
Well, go ahead and answer the question, and instead of taking shots, answer the question.
Excuse me, Toots, calm down. Listen,
I calm down. You won't answer the question.
This is national security.
And who determines that?
This is not 24. There's no Kiefer Sutherland. This is a war. You're trying to spy on terrorists. You're trying to track money that terrorists and other terrorists to kill us. Now, if you want to play, I got you.
And when the New York Times looked at that, Chris, when the New York Times looked at that, because when they originally published this story, there was a long letter from the editor explaining how they had talked to the government, that they gave this serious consideration. They didn't see where this compromised national security. You don't think that they did that properly?
If the administration says, would you please not run this story because it compromises national security, since they're in the national security business, not the gotcha business, I would take their word for it.
I love it. They're going to take their word for it. Like we take their word for the fact that when they find out later on that they're actually spying on Americans without any subpoena, without any judicial oversight, etc.
That's a great buzzword, Bernie, and a great way to divert from the matter at hand.
The answer to the question, Chris, is you want the government to be able to say that something is national security, and then you want the government to be able to tell a newspaper that it can't publish it. You don't have a mouth to put them in. You just said you want the government to determine what's national security, and then the government should determine whether the New York Times...
Why don't you just surrender? Just
Chris,
surrender.
It's simple. Do you want the government to be able to tell newspapers what to do or not?
Well, let me ask you this.
I want responsible newspaper people to
You didn't answer the question.
Should Bernie, maybe the courts look at this? Should the courts look at this?
Of course the courts should look at this.
You have Peter King saying, look, maybe Alberto Gonzales, excuse me for a minute, Alberto Gonzales has been called on by a Republican, Peter King, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee of the House. He says he should investigate whether or not this is treason. Should there be some sort of investigation, settle this issue once and for all, Bernie?
Well, first of all, there's no war. You can't have war on a tactic, even though Chris would like to say so. You can't have war on a tactic. Secondly, these guys have already trashed the Fourth Amendment twice, and we didn't know about it for 5 years. It was only because the media got involved that we know about it at all. And third, I love Chris's position. His position is, since the government determines national security, the government then tells the newspapers whether they can publish it or not. Absolutely. Tell me where I'm wrong on that, Chris.
Words out of context,
well, then you explain to me where I'm wrong. Do you want them to
shut up for 2 seconds?
Hey, Chris, did you want them to tell the New York Times not to publish?
Okay, Chris, go ahead. Answer him.
Look, I'm trying to have a conversation, a dialogue here. We're supposed to all be Americans. Now, if you want to drag me in here for a mud fight, then put us in the same stinking room, okay? But for God's sake,
I wouldn't want to hurt you.
You know, I'm done with this. Just cut me off. I'm done with this jackass.
Well, I'm glad, because you know what, Chris? He's done with it because he hasn't answered the question, which is real simple. Who determines what a newspaper publishes? The First Amendment or the government? The bottom line is we know more now about what the government is doing to us without a court, without a warrant, without a subpoena than we've known because of Congress, and the American people ought to be very concerned about their Fourth Amendment rights and whether they're being protected. And Chris and others like him would like the government to be the one that says, okay, you can publish this, but you can't publish that.
All right,
Do I have to remind
Chris,
everybody about the Pentagon Papers?
Chris has unhooked